Hello, welcome back to the second segment of the lectures on the ethical justification of markets and of globalization. The topic of this segment is a utilitarian justification of markets, a particular sort of utilitarian justification, an indirect justification, and a use of an economic form of utilitarianism. So, just to remind you where we are, we looked last segment at contractarian justifications. Remember the avoiding prisoners dilemmas? And we talked briefly about the libertarian justification having to do with natural rights to property and to free exchange and the self-ownership of labor. And well, they're important to know about. The usual and most powerful, perhaps, justification of markets is utilitarian. It maximizes everybody's welfare, the aggregate welfare of everyone. Okay, and this is what we're going to talk about today. Remember the discussion of utilitarianism back in lectures, I think 5 or so. The difference between direct utilitarianism and indirect utilitarianism. Direct and indirect. Direct utilitarianism treats utilitarianism as a decision procedure that is used in the evaluation of each action. You just sum up the utilities of the action, of all of the consequences that the action causes. Indirect utilitarianism is a little bit trickier. It doesn't judge it doesn't go act by act, but it judges it judges maybe, let's say, decision procedures generally by saying, well, look, let's apply utilitarianism to rules or to virtues or to maybe even rights or justice, and see what sort of rules we should use. And if we follow those rules, we will then generally we will maximize total utility. It advocates whatever is needed to maximize aggregate utility. And if self-interested behavior is what is needed, let's see here if I can control my pen, then that's what it calls for. And this is the argument in favor of the market, that if everybody behaves within the rules of the market, not just behaves generally, but obeys the rules of the market, but it becomes a ethical egoist decision rule, decides for themselves what's best for themselves, then this will produce the maximum aggregate utility for everyone. So this is the idea. The indirect utilitarian justification says everyone should pursue their own self-interest, and that will maximize the aggregate preference satisfaction for everyone. And it's indirect because it doesn't say whenever you're deciding what to do, be a utilitarian. It says whenever you're trying to decide what to do, be an ethical egoist. And this is comes out of Adam Smith's idea that first of all, that the market works. You don't ask for benevolence. You ask people to act in their self-interest. And thirdly, by this notion of the invisible hand. People will be led within a free market system, will be led by an invisible hand to promote an end, which is the maximum happiness, maximum welfare of everyone, aggregated. There's issues about who gets what, but aggregated. And that wasn't what people intended. Okay, so our justification is based on indirect utilitarianism, and it's also based on economic thinking. Remember, utilitarians sometimes measure happiness in terms of pleasure and pain. Sometimes they measure happiness in terms of preference satisfaction, and then they have to measure preference satisfaction. And one way to do this is to adopt the economic utilitarianism, where you measure preference satisfaction by how much people are willing to pay to get something. What's the intensity of people's preference is measured by how much they're willing to pay. And it's the maximum willingness to pay is this maximum amount of money that somebody would be willing to exchange for the economic good that they want. Willingness to pay, it's not total willingness to pay, it's the marginal willingness to pay for one more item. So if you already have 5 cookies, it's how much you would pay for the 6th cookie. It's not how much you're willing, not the average you would pay for all 6, but how much you would pay for that 6th one. And in general, you're going to be willing to pay less for the for later cookies, right? After you've already eaten 5, a 6 cookie's not going to look so good. And it's not equal to the market price. It's not. It's actually the person's reservation price. It's the person how much somebody would be willing to pay for that cookie in the absence of various factors, including a market price. Because if you know the market price for cookies is $1 each, you're not going to pay $2 no matter how much you want one. So it's somebody's reservation price, the amount they would pay when the price isn't established. So I am assuming that you are all economists of some form or other, so I'm going to skip quickly through this, but I will remind you that the difference between the total and the marginal utility of economic goods and services. The total utility is just the total of all the utility produced by the consumption of a basket of goods or services. The marginal utility, which is what we're going to be talking about mostly here, is the additional utility gained through the consumption of one more unit of that good or service. All right, and that's going to be crucial in what follows. And you can have marginal benefits and you can have marginal costs. Again, remind you about 2 things you, I'm sure, learned in microeconomics. One is the law of diminishing marginal utility, and that just says as you consume more and more of a good, the consumption of each additional increment is going to give you less pleasure, and consequently you're going to be willing to pay less for it. You know, think again of those cookies. First cookie's really good, second cookie's not so good, ... After 8 or 10 cookies, you don't really want any more. You can go much past that. Maybe your utility goes negative as you start being ill. The other assumption is the law of increasing marginal costs. And that states that in the short run, well, I'm not going to deal with that. I'll leave that to economics. But in the short run, the marginal cost of producing each additional item will tend to increase. And that's just because people produce things in the cheapest way first, and then after they've done as they go along producing more and more, they often have to find more and more expensive ways of producing them. I.e., pick the low-hanging tree on the low-hanging fruit on the tree first. And so you get graphs like this. Here's marginal benefits, or an illustration thereof. If you graph total benefits, not marginal, total benefits on this side here, say the benefits measured as willingness to pay for, let's say, a bottle of beer. You're willing to pay $5 for the first one. Second one, you're willing to pay $9. What's happening here, the third one you're willing to pay 12. What's happening here is that as you have more and more beer, the amount you're willing to pay for each additional beer goes down. Here's the first one you're willing to pay, let's say from here to here, which is $5. But the second one is from there to there. Sorry, this pen doesn't work very closely here, which is only from $5 up to $9 is only 4. So there's the marginal benefit of that beer is 5 here, 4 here. I think if you look at this, that's from 9 up to 12. That's 3 here, and then from here it's 14 to 12. So that's 2, 1, and 0. Okay, so and it diminishes because the first beer is more valuable. Generally, just a psychological aspect about people's habituation to pleasurable things. Okay, so this leads us to what's sometimes called the fundamental theorem of welfare economics. This is that the self-interested buying and selling, this is as egoists, ethical egoist decision rule, buying and selling of market participants will lead them to an equilibrium where the marginal benefits of each additional item consumed equal the marginal cost of producing it. The same equilibrium will also maximize total benefits. Same equilibrium maximizes total benefits, and it is the product of self-interest. See, this is the neat thing. It's kind of elegant, really. The utilitarian view is that you have to maximize total net benefits, and the way you do this is by getting people to follow their own self-interested rules. People don't have to be benevolent. They don't have to be nice. They don't have to be going out there and trying to serve the greater good or anything like that. Just by being self-interested, under these sort of rules, they will be led to maximize total net benefits. And in the abstract, this is a really nice little argument. So economic utilitarianism says that people ought to cause the maximum total net benefits, and therefore people will do what they ought, that people will be doing what they ought to do when they behave self-interestedly. They will be following an economic decision, an indirect economic utilitarian procedure when they do this, even though their decisions are made self-interestedly. So let's just see how this goes, and I hope this is probably not news for you how this works, but here we've got the marginal cost here going up as we produce more and more items, and here we have the marginal benefits going down as we consume more and more items. Okay, so let's first see what will happen if we produce, the equilibrium appears to be at about $2,003.50. Okay, or let's say the intersection here, right here. Okay, let's suppose that less items are produced than this intersection shows. Suppose let's suppose that we're looking here at, say, I don't know, whatever that would be, say 1,600 items. Okay, can anybody make a profit by producing more? Well, yes, because somebody is willing to pay this much, right? Somebody's willing to pay this much here, and somebody is willing to produce them for this much, and so if they're self-interested, they will produce another one. But if they get over this side here, the marginal cost, so supposing they're past this point here, then the marginal cost of producing a new one is a bit more than the marginal benefit of producing it, so you won't be able to find anybody who will want to do it because they won't be paid enough to cover their marginal costs. So self-interested behavior is going to lead to this point here, the intersection. Okay, this is now that's thinking of it. What's the self-interested behavior? What happens from the utilitarian point of view when we're talking about overall happiness here? Well, if we're below 2,000 items, here's our intersection here. Oops, sorry, at 2,000. Sorry, that's really bad. And $3.50. If we're below that point, then the marginal benefit of producing one more item, that's the marginal benefit of producing one more item is going to be higher than the marginal cost of producing it. Doesn't matter who does the producing and who does the consuming, it's just that the benefits will be higher than the cost. So it will make, so the maximum is going to be over to this way, right? But if you go beyond this point, the marginal cost is going to be higher than the marginal benefit, so you're going to start reducing the total utility. Okay, and so you'd be wanting to go back, and again, only at the intersection here, where marginal cost equals marginal benefit, will the market be in equilibrium because self-interested buyers and sellers will be covering their costs, and it will also maximize total utility because at that point, if you produce any more than that, you will reduce utility, and if you produce any less, you will also reduce utility. Okay, so the point of that, let me just go back, is just what I said here. The self-interested buying and selling of market participants will lead them to an equilibrium where marginal benefit equals marginal costs, and the same equilibrium will maximize total net benefits. And that's what therefore, if the people should follow a decision procedure in the market, which is to look after their own self-interest, and by doing so, they will be good indirect economic utilitarians. Okay, so that's the idea, and in the next segment I'm going to talk about some problems with this. But before we get there, which of the following is the best example, just to make sure you got these ideas, of indirect utilitarianism? So pause the video, think for a second, and come back. Okay, here we go. Every decision that a manager makes should maximize the aggregate happiness. Well, every decision should maximize the aggregate happiness. This is direct, right? This is the direct version of utilitarianism. Every time you make a decision, you employ a utilitarian decision rule. requiring everyone to maximize their own preference satisfaction will also maximize the total happiness of the population. This is starting to be indirect, right? Because this is what we've just been looking at. So let's just record that for a second. Don't cross it out. We can predict that each party will negotiate from an initial position that maximizes the party's own interest. So that's actually just a statement of psychological egoism. We can predict it. That's what people do if psychological egoism is true. Each party should negotiate from an initial position that maximizes. This is ethical egoisms, right? Because it's ethical. It's saying that you should do this, not that you will do this. Here's an is, right? This is and here's an ought. And this is ethical egoism here, and this is psychological egoism here. This one here is the indirect utilitarian view, that people should maximize their own preference satisfaction, follow an ethical egoist decision-making rule, and by doing so, they will indirectly maximize total happiness. All right, so come back in just a second, next segment, to see some of the problems with this rather elegant little proof.